Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. If you are actually, I'm going to stop sharing here for just a second and turn on my camera here for a moment. There we go. All right. First and foremost, thank you guys so much for being here today. We are excited to get this re-recording done. We are going to talk about all things perimenopause today, which should be a very exciting portion of this re-recording of the Women's Health and Hormone Conference. And at the end of this call, there will be an opportunity to ask questions, and I will also fill you in at the end on what is coming next with re-recording options. So I'm going to do a little screen share with our slides that we used at the hormone conference. So bear with me while I get that going here. All right, let's see, screen share. And let's just see, share screen. There we go. Perfect. All right, we're going to start this call today with a little personal history about why I feel excited and confident about talking about perimenopause today. So, my name is Kari Grof. I am a board certified functional medicine, health, and wellness coach. I have a bit of a background in hormones now, and we are going to talk today about what's actually happening in your body during the perimenopause transition of life. So, first and foremost, I want to give you a little background about myself. This is our crew. This is my husband, Jeff, in the center. And this was one of the girls' weddings, Courtney's weddings over the last year. And my two children, Kennedy and Carson, and then Jeff's four. We are a blended family and super grateful to get to do life together. This is my why right here, my best friend on the right, Jeff, and my reason for showing up in the day, and then our two incredible grandkids that we've started off this part of grandparenting life with. We're having a great time with Levi and Violet. So here's some pictures of them. I just like you guys to understand why I brought Violet up onto the stage during the hormone conference to share with. One of the reasons for doing this hormone conference is I have had a lifetime of difficulty with hormone balance, the majority of my life that started very young in my life when I reflect back. And I don't want that same story for Violet, a sweet little girl, that we have the chance to impact her life. And I hope you guys can see yourselves as you go through this in that story. So, a lot of the reasons and the choices that we make are to make their lives better. And create a different reality for the women behind us. I always say we stand on the shoulders of giants, meaning I wouldn't be who I am or where I am without the influences in my life, and our hope is to be that for someone else also. A little bit about my story because I think this is going to go into what we're going to go over about perimenopause today. On the left side of this screen here, I once found myself at nearly 300 pounds. And while, yes, this is a conversation about weight, there was so much happening. I had undiagnosed polycystic ovarian syndrome. I had a bit of endometriosis that I later learned. I had estrogen dominance happening, low progesterone happening, and an autoimmune disease happening with Hashimoto's thyroiditis or hypothyroid. I took my health into my hands after my mom, who is a physician's assistant, said to me one day, Carrie, something is very wrong. You are so puffy. And it was very validating because I thought I was just doing everything wrong nutritionally and not moving enough. And I got myself into doing triathlons and half marathons and sprint triathlons and a lot beach body programs. I've done all of them. And I definitely found myself in a much better place and healed my body in a lot of ways, but also created some additional issues for myself because I was overtraining and it was making my autoimmune disease worse and my cortisol levels rise. I ended up having skin removal surgery. And the reason I'm sharing that with you guys today is because that surgery actually put me earlier into perimenopause than I had anticipated. That surgery really set my body backwards, um, and became an obstacle that I wasn't really anticipating. So I guess that my point of all of that is Your body's giving you clues if you listen and you learn to hear what your body's telling you. And that's really what I want you to walk away with today is feeling more empowered with information to know how to read what your body is trying to tell you, okay? And get better at interpreting those signals. I'm going to start with some information about PCOS today before we go into perimenopause. We're seeing a lot of PCOS in our office. If you haven't heard of it, it's polycystic ovarian syndrome, or what we could also define as androgenic syndrome, meaning females also have male sex hormones, which are specifically DHEA and testosterone in our bodies. And it's super important that those two levels are balanced. Not too high, not too low, but just right. All hormones have sort of a Goldilocks syndrome. They like to be perfectly balanced. You will feel best when your hormones are well balanced at the level that your body wants to be at. That helps your body stay in a place of PCOS, or I'm sorry, at a place of balance and optimization and homeostasis. When you have PCOS, sorry, I misspoke there, but when you have PCOS, your DHEA and or testosterone, typically testosterone levels are elevated. So PCOS, I used to believe even until as recently as a couple of years ago, I used to think that this was an ovary problem because it's polycystic ovarian syndrome, right? It must be an ovary problem. But turns out it's actually a metabolic issue, meaning your blood sugars are impacted, the way that your body stores insulin, handles insulin, signals insulin to your body, and PCOS will make you metabolically resistant, meaning your cells have a hard time hearing the insulin signal, and therefore your body has to produce more insulin, and insulin is a fat storing hormone. In addition to that, with polycystic ovarian syndrome, because of that metabolic problem, your ovaries get cystic activity on them. This can lead to infertility. This can lead to anxiety and depression, insulin resistance, irregular hair growth. I have a lot of PCOS people come in and say, I have facial hair. I'm getting like chin whiskers or neck whiskers or even like sideburns, that kind of thing. That typically is a really, really big indicator that your testosterone levels are imbalanced and elevated. PCOS symptoms can include irregular, missed, or very light periods, acne, weight gain, sleep issues, mood swings, high testosterone, as we talked about, pelvic pain, and fatigue. It's not just infertility or even missing periods that can happen when those hormones are so imbalanced. We're seeing so much of this now, and I believe that it's because I think a lot of it is developed di in the diet in the early years of life. So if you are a parent and you're feeding your children, let's use, for example, like Eggo waffles, so processed carbohydrates without any protein for breakfast, you're making a big mistake. I want all of us to remember, think about a savory breakfast, not sugar loaded, not processed, protein-rich breakfast. This doesn't mean that carbs are bad, but we need to balance it with protein too to help our bodies signal metabolically appropriately. So that's a little information about PCOS. If you have more questions, I recently on my Facebook account did a series on PCOS information, and we do see clients in the office all the time to help support PCOS and get those hormones tested and balanced. If you ever have any questions about PCOS, we are an open book. All right, next up, another thing that we are seeing is a lot. Actually, let me back up to that. This is a really good visual. Um, I'll come back to that. Let's talk about endometriosis for a little bit. This is another one that we're seeing a lot of. Endometriosis is a whole body disease. Oftentimes, if you have a daughter yourself, friend, family member, friend, anyone that you love and care about who is suffering with the debilitating, painful periods, that is not normal. Please spread the word. Painful and debilitating periods are not normal. They are not necessary. And it is your body telling you a signal, as we talked about on the top of this call. All of these symptoms, leg pain, heavy periods, mood changes, nerve pain, bloating, cramping, rectal pain, constipation, headaches, chest pain, painful sex, urinary issues, sciatica, pelvic pain, brain fog, nausea, anxiety, back pain, fatigue, endometriosis belly, like bloating kind of stuff. It's not just a bad period. It's your body telling you something. Endometriosis can be really difficult to diagnose. On examination, it cannot be seen typically unless it's really, really, really bad and they're scarring. It's really, you can almost most of the time cannot see it with an ultrasound. It can typically only be diagnosed by going in surgically and looking at the tissues to see. And it also almost looks like little ulcerations. I almost wish I had a picture of endometriosis under a surgical evaluation. And when it gets sent off to pathology, it will show endometriosis. That's how it's diagnosed. Now, we are never advocating for that anyone needs to go have that done to have endometriosis diagnosed, but more the reason about talking about this endometriosis situation is we are seeing so many women in our practice who are coming in with heavy and debilitating periods, difficulty conceiving, um, pelvic pressure, or their pelvic inflammation constantly, really painful. A lot of, it comes with a whole host of, I would say, symptoms. So this is something that either needs to be ruled in or out because it does matter and it does help you know how to treat those symptoms and to have a better outcome of hormone balance and really taking care of the whole body. Because as we said, endometriosis is a whole body disease. Okay. All right, so let's move forward. I'm also going to talk a little bit about histamine. Histamine is something that we're seeing a lot of um, with allergies. A lot of women think that they're just having an allergy response, especially this time of year. The seasons are changing, the weather's changing day to day. It's all over the place if you're in Michigan, like me, and it can leave you feeling itchy, watery eyes, that kind of thing. Histamine, that's a histamine response, but oftentimes when hormones are imbalanced, you can have an histamine response. This can include itching skin, hives, rashes. Pay attention if that's happening. If you're having any weird symptoms, like I will tell you, I've had histamine issues and I would wake up and it would feel like my nose was inside kind of all swollen and like I needed to use a neti pot to kind of clean out my sinuses. That should not be happening. That's a histamine response. I encourage you, if you're having symptoms like that with itching, skin itching, little different responses, like even on the trunk, it can ha on your trunk, it can happen. Certain foods can cause a histamine response. Um, Treating that histamine response can be very life-changing. Sometimes when your histamine levels are very low, it will make you very anxious. We see a lot of histamine issues in perimenopause, so I did not want to leave this out. Look up mast cell activation syndrome if you ever get the chance. I'm not going to go super deep into that today, but basically what I want you to know about that is when your gut health is not, meaning your um your colon is not balanced and you don't have a great mi gut microbiome, maybe there's imbalances happening there too. You can have what's called a mast cell activation. And with a mast cell activation, you will have a lot of these rashes or oh, swelling of the nasal passages, and just anxiety. It can show up as a lot of anxiety for a lot of women. So that needs to be addressed as well. So that's a little about histamine response. All right, so now we're going to go into 10 signs you might be in perimenopause that no one warned you about. I want you all to know there is not one test that can tell you if you're in perimenopause. So if you're wondering if you're in perimenopause, I can help that you answer that question for yourself. If you are, roughly the age of 35 to 55-ish, and this can be within the ish, like heavy on the ish part of this. But if you're starting to have changes in periods, your cycles aren't the same as they once were, you're experiencing maybe difficulty sleeping, new anxiety, poor stress resilience, fatigue, insomnia, any of those kinds of symptoms that we're going to go through, you're probably in perimenopause, and you don't need a test to tell you that. You can make the assumption that you are probably in perimenopause. So here's what kind of happens. I want to give you a visual, and I love this part because it can be super, super helpful to those of us who are visual learners. This is what a regular cycle would look like on a graph. So I'll walk you through what each one of these means. So you'll see this black line, or I guess it's more of a gray through here, okay? So this is day 0 of a cycle, and this is headed towards the end of a cycle today, like it looks like 22 over there. On day 1 of the cycle, our estrogen levels will be a little bit lower. This gray line is the estrogen levels throughout a cycle. This is what it should look like on a balanced, regular cycle. You'll see a low estrogen on the front end of your symptoms, but also like there's some estrogen there, and then a peak rise in estrogen, and then it will tail off, and then a period will start. Day one is the day you start your bleed, and then the last day of your period is the day before you start your next bleed. So day one, your period starts. Then the next day one is the next period starts. So if you end at day 28, that's the end of your cycle. It would have been a 28-day cycle. Okay. The other number or I'm sorry, the other part of this graph that's very valid is the purple line. That is a progesterone level. So I always describe it like this. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment. So I always describe it like this, and I think this can be super helpful to this conversation. So progesterone or I'm sorry, estrogen is the boss. And I don't know why it's not showing me. There we go. Estrogen is the boss. So I'm going to make kind of some things with my hands here. Estrogen is the boss. Everything from the top of our head to the bottom of our toes is an estrogen receptor. Everything, your brain, your bones, your heart, your muscle, your nerves, everything in the body is an estrogen receptor, okay? And estrogen is the boss. I don't like to vilify her because I think she's been vilified. Um, in the Women's Health Initiative years and years ago that made everybody afraid of estrogen. We need estrogen. She's very, very important. But she's also kind of like Goldilocks. She can't be too high and she can't be too low. She's got to be just right. Okay. And then there's progesterone, who is like the best friend that comes over, tucks you into bed, hands you your favorite treat or glass of wine or whatever is your thing, and takes care of everything else, the kids, the house, the laundry, all the things. That's progesterone. It is a very calming, sedating, anti-anxiety, balancing hormone, and they like to play together. What we see typically in our practice is estrogen is too high and progesterone is too low. When in perimenopause, if you're having any hormone imbalance, typically the first thing that goes down is your progesterone levels. So I'm going to flip back over to that graph now that you've seen that. So let me go back to screen share a second. Thank you. Share. Okay, so we're back to this for a second. And by the way, if you guys have anything you want to add in the comments, please do. I'll keep an eye on the comments and we can answer those at some point. Okay. All right, so progesterone starts over here. It kind of rides along this pretty steady line throughout the month in a typical balanced cycle. It plays pretty close to estrogen and progesterone. This is kind of midway through the cycle. I'll talk about that in a second. After we have a peak, this would signal ovulation. This luteinizing hormone goes up, that signals ovulation, and then the progesterone starts to rise. This is what helps retain a pregnancy in your reproductive years. But this is what a balanced, regular cycle would look like and that you could predict. The LH, the teal line through this, is your luteinizing hormone. That is the hormone and follicle stimulating hormone that's basically yelling at your reproductive organs to release an egg and then prepare for implantation. And if implantation doesn't begin, obviously a period begins, but you want to see that natural progesterone rise. In perimenopause, this purple line on this graph is the first thing that drops out. Here's a perimenopause cycle. As you can see, this graph looks very different. So let's look at some of the big differences. In perimenopause, estrogen starts to become very erratic. Do you see that gray line through this? Extremely erratic throughout the perimenopause transition. The progesterone also starts to become erratic and different. And also, do you see how there isn't this normal rise of progesterone at the end of a cycle? That can incite anxiety, insomnia, poor stress resilience, fatigue, moodiness, raginess, agitated easily. Suddenly, your husband breathing is way too much. It's unequivocally uh, can't handle it, can't support it kind of thing. Okay. So I want you to see the difference there of what is happening. Big difference in estrogen and progesterone in the perimenopause cycle transition. Okay. Um, the luteinizing hormone starts to get a little bit louder. The follicle stimulating hormone starts to get a little bit louder. Ovulation may or may not occur. There isn't a great peak right here. There's a little peak, so there's the potential that on this particular graph, ovulation did occur, but then you can see progesterone didn't hold. So if this was going to be like a normal reproductive cycle, this wouldn't have been great because the progesterone didn't hold. And that can show up, as I said, like a lot of different symptoms. But those signals from your brain, the luteinizing and follicle stimulating hormone, have to get louder. Do you see how this yellow line is way above what it, I'll look at the previous, see how it was nice and small at the bottom there. It just kind of had to give a little bit of a signal. Now it's getting louder and louder and louder. So you can see how your body is doing the most without doing anything. And oftentimes, as symptoms, this shows up as poor stress resilience. And I often validate for women in my office what you're feeling. Like, how come I can't handle the things that I used to handle? Like, how come all of a sudden I can hear my husband breathing and I don't know that I want him to be alive because his breathing is driving me crazy? Like, what is that? What is physiologically happening? Your body is going through so many different variances. Day to day, it looks very different. So your body is doing the most without doing anything at all. So you have to give yourself a little bit of grace in this season and also work really hard to do the things which we're going to talk about that help you balance your hormones, okay? All right, so let's talk about what's actually happening to your body. I want you guys all to understand with perimenopause, there are a couple of different phases to this process. It doesn't happen in a moment, and it's a transition that unfolds in stages, okay? I like that line up there at the top where it says it's not one moment, it's a transition that unfolds in stages. So early perimenopause, mid perimenopause, late perimenopause, and the benefit to kind of seeing where you're falling in that if you're in the perimenopause transition is to help you know how to help yourself during that specific time in your transition. So let's talk about early perimenopause. This is where you might start finding yourself with brain fog and difficulties concentrating. I often will tease clients in my office about, do you suddenly find yourself trying to put your laundry inside of your freezer? Or do you walk, why did mine was, I started seeing this for myself. I would put my phone inside the refrigerator. I don't know, but I did that one too many times for sure. Or you can't, you can't find your phone and it's actually in your hand. You just start seeing these really weird, like difficulty concentrating. Poor word recall is very common in this too. Like I can't find the word or I know her name and I can't that's the cognitive part of perimenopause that starts to happen because your brain is having to prioritize those signals, that follicle stimulating hormone, that luteinizing hormone. It's a lot of strain on your brain too. It happens in the brain first before it ever happens in the reproductive organs. So your brain can easily be impacted, okay? So that's why that brain fog and difficulty concentrating shows up. I don't want you to just accept it though. Know that it's common, but it's not a curse, it's not forever, and it is something to fight for, okay? It's your body talking to you. Oftentimes in early perimenopause, sleep starts slipping. Sometimes you start waking up at 2 to 3 a.m. That progesterone level starts to bottom out. Often our livers are extra taxed. Our liver is responsible for metabolizing estrogen. And because of the compound effect of all of the things our liver has to do in a day, that becomes really, really taxing on the liver during perimenopause. So you'll really find yourself starting to wake up at 2 to 3 a.m. That can also be blood sugar dysregulating because it's much more sensitive in this season. That can also be that progesterone or estrogen dipping. That's just, you're having a hard time maybe falling asleep or even staying asleep. We often say progesterone puts you to sleep, estrogen keeps you asleep. So kind of paying attention to where you're at in that. Also, in early perimenopause, you might find that PMS starts to turn up the volume. So if you've had mild PMS symptoms, throughout your life, like your period's coming, you might get a little headache, or you maybe have had a history of I'm a little more cry the week before my period, but suddenly it turns into I used to just maybe be a little sad the week before my period, and now I'm like completely falling apart the week before my period. That's what we mean by the PMS turns up the volume, okay? Just things get louder. The symptoms get more debilitating or interruptive to your life is maybe a good way to say that. The anxiety, if you've never struggled with anxiety and suddenly you're like, why am I worrying about the kinds of things I'm worrying about? You might be in perimenopause. Anxiety often either appears new or worsens. Not for everyone, but oftentimes you may find yourself more anxious. That's the progesterone leaving the building. Stress starts to feel harder to manage. Your stress resilience, like I said, it used to be, I don't know, I think back to my 20s and 30s and like, wow, I could really handle a lot. Like, how did I do some of the things I did during those years? Because I was so resilient. I could not handle near the things I could in my 20s and 30s that I can in my 40s. My 40s, I have to be much more intentional about getting myself to bed at a good time and waking myself up at a certain time and kind of keeping a strong rhythm and routine in my life because I'm very sensitive to those shifts where in my 20s and 30s I was not. So your stress resilience starts to feel harder to manage. Mid-perimenopause, your energy can start to crash, your recovery gets slower. So while you might be like me and I used to be able to do all those beach body workouts, you might not be able to do all that intensity anymore, and that's okay. Perimenopause is not the time to go harder, faster, stronger, worse, even though your body is kind of rebelling against you, it can feel like, and maybe you're packing on a few extra pounds and you want to, work out harder to mitigate that. You'll probably be doing yourself a disservice, which we'll talk a little bit about later on the call. Brain fog starts to deepen. It just gets a little worse sometimes. Your focus can wane. You might find yourself having a difficult time focusing or executing your daily tasks. Body composition, as I just discussed, your weight might start to shift. Like, why am I suddenly carrying more weight in my hips? I didn't used to pack it on there. Or maybe it starts to gain around your midsection. Be mindful, and there are ways that we're going to talk about in a little bit about how to support your body better during this time. But this is a signal of mid-perimenopause. Your digestion can slow and your cravings can suddenly increase. Many times throughout the week, have women in my office like, I am craving sugar so bad. Like, I love my treats, and suddenly that didn't used to be a thing, and suddenly it's a thing for me. Okay. Then let's talk about late perimenopause. This is when your cycles start to go off script. You used to follow maybe a 28, whatever day cycle if you've had balanced hormones. Now, if you're that PCOS person or endometriosis person, maybe you don't follow a normal rhythm and routine and have never been super balanced. But in the typical, your cycles in late perimenopause begin to look like um, you can start missing periods. You can go from 28-day cycles to 44-day cycles, or you can go months without a period and then suddenly have another period, or they can get closer together. There's no script to the late perimenopause period game, okay? Your ovarian reserve, we are born with all of the eggs that we're going to have, and in those eggs that they're starting to get down to the end of what you have available. And as those ovaries start to tap out, peace out, they're out, they leave the building sort of thing. Your adrenals have to take over some of the balancing of that. Your adrenals make your cortisol level, which is your stress hormones, and that transition is very difficult on the body. So that's why you'll start to see those numbers go, or I'm sorry, yeah, the numbers of days go different on your cycles or off script. Hot flashes and night sweats start to arrive. This is late perimenopause. Sleep disruption can peak. Your body prepares for menopause. Your joint and muscle aches increase. Here's the biggest thing I want you to know about late perimenopause. It is often appropriate during late perimenopause to to um, begin to see kind of um, women start to use hormone replacement therapy, which we'll talk about, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy during this sooner than later. The research is emerging and showing that the more quickly that you initiate therapy, the less symptomology you have and the less you have to make up for later. So, I want to encourage you today to begin to educate yourself if this is all new to you. Begin to educate yourself on if if you're a candidate and if you want to consider hormone replacement therapy, if you're in late perimenopause, it's not too early to start to discern through if that's an appropriate time for you because things can get very, very difficult. Um, I also encourage you to reach out to our office and have a consultation, what we call a hormone consultation. And I'm telling you that when things get so off script, your night sweats, hot flashes, you're not sleeping, your stress resilience is really poor. It can be super interruptive to your job, your marriage, your relationships in your life, and you might need some support through that time, whether that's hormone replacement therapy or not. There are different ways to support you. So I encourage you to have someone who is well versed in walking you through that part of the transition if it's becoming too difficult and too much. Okay. All right, so let's go on to the next page. Oops, sorry. All right, so next thing, we're going to go over 100 signs and symptoms of perimenopause. Central nervous system, vasomotor symptoms. I'll talk about vasomotor symptoms. That's like your hot flashes, just your body doing things like why don't I have control over that? Your vasomotor symptoms, okay? Um, Sleep disruption, anxiety, depression, cognitive changes, weight and metabolic changes, weight gain, increased visceral adiposity, meaning you start gaining weight around your midsection, increased waist circumference, increased risk of heart disease, urogenital system changes, meaning when we go through perimenopause into full-blown menopause, there are changes that happen in our labia, in our vulva, in the clitoris, in all of the genital in our ureter. You can start having yeast infections more often, or even difficulty with urinary incontinence. Those sort of things start to change. It is a normal part of that transition that should be supported, okay? You can start to struggle with vaginal dryness, vulvar itching and burning, painful urination frequency, urgency, urinary infections, skin, mucosal, and hair changes, reduced skin thickness, reduced elasticity, reduced hydration, increased wrinkling, hair loss, sexual function changes, decreased libido, painful sex, musculoskeletal system changes, joint pain, stiffness, loss of muscle mass, osteoporosis. All of those things are symptoms and signs of perimenopause and menopause transition. Symptoms of low estrogen during perimenopause. Sorry, I'm going to take a drink. All right. Irregular or missed periods that we talked about, mood swings, hot flashes, breast tenderness, headaches or worsening migraines. If you're having your period start and getting a migraine, that's a sign that your estrogen is tanking. Depression, fatigue. I would also add apathy to this list, meaning suddenly you just have a very flat affect about life or don't care about things that maybe you would prefer to or ought to. Difficulty concentrating, decreased or absence of libido, pain during intercourse, lack of vaginal lubrication, and vaginal loosening. Those are all signs of low estrogen symptoms, and you do not need to just accept that this is normal. This is a part that should and ought to be supported, and it deserves a conversation around support. I also want you to understand what musculoskeletal syndrome of menopause is, or MSM. So, suddenly you start having pain in your muscles, arms, and legs, weakness and loss of muscle mass. That turns into fracture or bone risk, poor healing, longer recovery time. We want to pay attention to this because estrogen is directly impacting every single one of those musculoskeletal symptoms and syndrome of menopause. Okay. It's a real thing. If you're suddenly like, man, my joints hurt, my neck hurts. When I was struggling with some of this, I always just had this really tight neck pain that just did not make sense. I will tell you, when my estrogen levels were restored, that was gone. I don't struggle with really any joint pain anymore. And I'm not going to lie to you, it's pretty great. All right, so let's talk about some testing options. If you have any questions, again, feel free to leave them in the chat. Paige, I saw your comment there. All three stages at once. Yeah, that can happen too, of the back on the perimenopause, early, mid, and late stages. They'll all come together. All right, so let's go through the testing options. So what, if any, hormone testing could you or might you consider? All right, so we have a couple of different options, and we do offer these here in our office when I see clients. I'm pretty, let's say, careful about when and how I choose to do any hormone testing. And here's why. Not everyone needs to do it. And in perimenopause, there are some downfalls to it. Your hormones are changing, as we saw in that graph earlier, day to day, over and over. Everything can look different all the time. So it can be challenging, not impossible, but challenging to find the right time to test. However, I am a test, don't guess type of person. And this is how I approach my own personal health when it comes to hormone testing. I like to know where my levels are. It helps me feel empowered. It helps me feel confident in the choices that I'm making, so I know where those levels are. So you come in for a consultation, and together you and I decide what what hormone testing might be appropriate or not appropriate, and really discern through how to make those decisions. It's all so nuanced. One of the things that I don't want you guys to forget is hormones are like a fingerprint. everyone's fingerprint is unique and different, and every hormone story is different. So it really takes some discerning through to help you decide what is the best way to approach any and if you should be testing, okay? So I'll talk about Dutch testing. This is a dried urine test. Um, what I love about Dutch testing, I can't remember if there's another slide after that that shows it. No, okay. So Dutch testing is a actually, why don't I, since we've got the opportunity here on Zoom, I'm going to show you no, I'm not because, yeah, I am. I'm going to show you a Dutch test. Hold on one moment. Let me pull up a visual of a Dutch test, but what I'm going to show you mine. Let's see. Okay, let's see if I can get it to present. I've got it up on the screen here. Just a moment. Okay, here is, how do I get it to share the screen? Okay, I have to close out the present option on the slideshow. Okay, now, okay, can you guys just let me know in the chat if you can see the screen? I want to make sure that you guys can see the screen. Share. There we go. Okay, I think I got it. There we go. Here is a Dutch test. So the first page is a summary. I'm going to move on to the next page in the spirit of saving time today, but I do think visuals can be very, very, very helpful here. So we're looking at kind of a cascade of hormones here. The very top is pregnenolone. Pregnenolone is the master hormone of memory here at the top. On the right-hand side are your progesterone levels. As you can see, my progesterone levels were kind of tanked over on the left side. I was very much in the throes of perimenopause during this test, trying to figure out what the heck was going on. And this box here, this is probably one of I have a lot of favorite parts of the Dutch, so bear with me because I'll probably say that about 5 times. But this is one of my favorite parts of a Dutch test, a dried urine test. We test all 3 forms of estrogen, E1, E2, and E3. I have a slide on this too that you'll probably see in a moment. But estrone is the most toxic form of estrogen. It lives in our fat cells. It's not the greatest form of estrogen. A little bit's okay. Too much is not a good thing. Then estradiol is the most abundant form of estrogen, and estriol is the most protective form of estrogen. Now, all of the estrogens methylate down a pathway, which is called first pass metabolism of estrogen. You can see this phase 1 metabolism. I was taking a supplement during my test that was called CDG estrogen, which is supposed to help detoxify and methylate estrogen well. So mine were pretty dialed down and pretty high dialed up on the protective pathway. So I always call this green pathway here the good, the red is the bad, and the blue is the ugly. So if this had been dialed up, it's a high risk for cancer, for estrogen dominant, like breast cancers or any female cancer. So I love that this test kind of helps us know how to help us detoxify estrogen. That is super important in cancer risk prevention. 4 pathway is a bad pathway. So if this had been dialed up at all, that would be alarming. I was pretty much everything going down the 2 pathway, but that was because of the supplement I was taking. So we can push toxic estrogens down the correct pathway, which is ideal. And again, one of my favorite parts of the Dutch, we want to help you detoxify estrogen in both phase 1 and phase 2 of estrogen detoxification because that helps your body stay in a very proactive state of handling estrogen. Very, very, very important to your well-being and overall. Now, my estrogen levels, you can see I really needed some estrogen replacement. I am currently on some estrogen replacement therapy. Okay. Over here on the left, I shared with you at the top of the call, I have some PCOS. My PCOS was pretty well controlled at this point, and I was supplementing with some PCOS support. But my DHEA level was a little on the low side. My testosterone was appropriate. And this also shows how your body methylates or aromatizes. It's a better way to say it. The testosterones in your body. I was well within range on that. Now, I'm going to go back to the estrogen for just a second. When we look at that methylation detoxification, this can cause DNA damage when not done appropriately. So when you have a Dutch test, you are really looking out for your well-being on the hormone side of things. I would say it is my favorite test for checking hormone balance, if you will. Okay. Um, I'm going to come back to that question, Kate, but I just saw your question come back, but I promise I will look at that in just a moment. All right, then this page kind of goes through just the levels, so I'm going to show you the visual. So when stress comes into our body, our stress tells our brain to tell our hypothalamus, to tell our pituitary, to tell our adrenal what to do. This is called the HPA axis. Stress is deeply impacted. I was taking melatonin because I was having a really hard time sleeping during this. As you saw, my progesterone level was really low. So I was overdosed a little bit on melatonin. Not always a terrible thing, but I probably didn't need quite that much. Here's the really cool part. When you hear about cortisol, cortisol will make you retain weight. It will make weight loss difficult. It signals poor, poor stress resilience to your body. It can keep you up at night. As you can see over here on the right, where it says daily free cortisol pattern, you should be in the middle of this gray box on a graph. I'm oversimplifying this just for the sake of the call, but this, you can see I was kind of what we call flatlined adrenals. My adrenals were like, cute, we're not doing anything. My stress levels were very high. I was going through perimenopause and my adrenals were really, really struggling. So the benefit of having this data really helped me know how to help my body heal. I went on to some adrenal support, started doing a lot of different things to help my adrenals come back on board. And I'm proud to tell you that they are so much better. When I rechecked my Dutch not that long ago, um, I had really, really, really improved. So I'd gotten myself out of the sympathetic dominance and into a parasympathetic state, gotten my body to heal by a lot of different ways. But I guess my point of sharing that with you is that healing is possible. And if you are in a place where you feel like I felt when I had this Dutch test done, I was an insomniac, I was highly anxious, I was not managing life well, my stress resilience was very poor, I was very fatigued. I was just kind of muscling through life with grit and not really enjoying. I had very little joy in
Oh,
my
and remember to ID everybody. Oh, okay, I got you. Start IDing.
Okay. So I was just very much at a place that things didn't feel very good. So we were trying to correct that. Here's another one of my favorite parts about the Dutch. Remember, I said there are many favorite parts about it. I love that it helps you really get to know how to heal your body and really learn a lot about your body. But the oat test or nutritional organic acids test, that's oat test, checks your B vitamins, which are very important to overall well-being and balance in the body. Glutathione is a master antioxidant. So if you want to help your body prevent cancer, glutathione can be very important to make sure that that's within range. If you have a biotin deficiency, that can lead to a lot of different symptoms. Gut marker or indican levels signal leaky gut. That signals if we need to help you heal your gut. You can see here I had low dopamine and norepinephrine levels. So I had to work on increasing my dopamine and norepinephrine levels because they were on the low end of range, you can see here. So these are neuro-related markers. Like, how is my brain being impacted by all of these imbalances? It quantifies it here for you. Also, neuroinflammation gets checked, melatonin gets checked, and then DNA or oxidative stress gets addressed as well. So I'm going to stop sharing that for a moment, and I'm going to flip back over to the slides in just a moment. Kate said, my daughter just started cycling and is struggling with severe anxiety and weight gain. Is this something that can assist her too? Do Kari or this presenter help young adults? Yeah, we do help young adults all the time. And I would encourage you in that type of scenario, get her an appointment sooner than later, because we can help you mitigate that so that this doesn't continue down the road and help her get in a proactive state so that she feels encouraged and empowered to have the tools to help her body best. Okay. I need to get back to presenter mode so you guys can see my slides again. So let me share my screen again. There we go. Okay. Thank you for your patience. Okay. So let's go back into testing options. So we went through Dutch. Now let's see, hang on. Let's go through saliva testing. Saliva, so Dutch I will almost always choose for anyone who know to be, or based on what the symptoms they're sharing with me in a consultation. If I see that they've got some estrogen dominance, maybe they have a family history of cardiovascular disease or female cancers in their family, or they're really struggling with weight loss resistance and they're still cycling. or I'm just really concerned about their estrogen levels. I'm concerned about their neuroinflammation. There's just a lot of things happening. That's typically when we know it's time to check a Dutch. It just gives such a comprehensive amount of information on the hormone side of things. There's, in my opinion, very little that's better. It's as comprehensive maybe as I think comprehensive is better. You can define that for yourself, but I like the Dutch. On the saliva side of things, I actually like saliva. I think it's very appropriate for our post-menopausal population, meaning if you've stopped cycling. So perimenopause, you're still having periods, right? Then you have one day. I'm going to stop screen share a second because I feel like you need to see me to hear this. Okay. Perimenopause is that transition of your ovaries are your ovarian reserve is ending, you're tapping out. Then there is one day, one day that you are in menopause. How many of you knew that? Like if you knew that, tell me in the chat. But the likelihood that most people know that menopause is one day of your life. It is the 365 days after your last period that you go without bleeding. That's still perimenopause, but that day that it's 365 days complete, that day you're in menopause, and the next day you're in postmenopause. Or if you've had a hysterectomy and lost your ovaries, then you are the day of your surgery, you are menopause. You're in menopause. The day after your surgery, you're postmenopause. I had a hysterectomy back in last September. I am postmenopause. I had my ovaries taken out too at that point. So understanding that part. So saliva, I'm going to go back to slides now. So saliva testing is great for the postmenopause because they're not having so many fluctuations. And the difference between perimenopause is where we work really hard in that season of our life to manage our symptoms, mitigate our symptoms, and balance our symptoms and get the best result. Basically, get our body to produce the amount of hormones that it has left optimally, okay? And potentially supplementally if necessary. In post-menopause, the mindset shifts to now, and this is also part of the transition spot, but I just think mentally it helps you kind of understand this. In post-menopause, it goes into more of a protective stance, protective of how you are approaching your health. So, protecting your brain, your bones, your heart, and your muscle. So I like saliva testing because you don't have to have quite as comprehensive. You can, but it's appropriate to also just check saliva levels. So in saliva testing, um, we can look at all three forms of estrogen or just estradiol, depending on the person. Again, it's very nuanced to what we're checking, but estradiol, estrone, and estriol can be checked in saliva, or we can look at DHEA, testosterone, progesterone, and then we look at what's called a 4-point cortisol, like I just showed you on the Dutch test, so that you can see kind of where those levels are. And that's important for understanding your body's cortisol rhythm. We see that go out of whack all the time when your adrenals are doing a lot of the work that your ovaries used to work and your body's having a hard time with stress resilience. We take a look at that to see how your cortisol pattern is impacting your well-being. So saliva testing is typically for the postmenopausal patient. Serum testing can be appropriate. It's not my personal favorite from a practitioner standpoint because I think it only gives like a very quick snapshot of what your hormone levels are doing. Serum is blood. And then Medicare offers a blood spot test if you are over the age of, I think it's 65, isn't that right? When you're eligible for Medicare, but Medicare pays for once a year a blood spot test. You can check your hormones. At that point of your life, your hormones are not doing a ton of fluctuating, so it's appropriate to do your free Medicare blood spot test at the age of 65 if you happen to be that person. Okay, so those are those types of typical best tests depending on what we're trying to understand about your hormones. And that requires a consultation. We do them here at the office. It gets sent to your home, it gets shipped out. We do not make any money on the testing, it's all outsourced. And then we see you back to go over those results to help you interpret it. Because if you got that report, you would not know how to interpret that yourself without a practitioner or provider to help you walk through that. And that's what I do pretty much all day, every day. Go through those types of test results and help you know how to approach your health with wisdom, education, and empowerment. Okay. All right. I want to share something about Function Health. So, Function Health is a direct to consumer. You guys can scan that QR code if it's helpful. When I see a lot of my perimenopausal or anyone in life struggling to get their provider, their primary care, to order lab work, Function Health is a great solution for that. If you are someone who's having a difficult time getting your provider to order the lab work that you want to have done, Function Health allows you to take that autonomy into your own hands, and you have a functional medicine provider on the back end of it who can interpret those labs with you. We also interpret labs here in our office. We can order labs here out of our office, but Function Health puts it in your hands and gives you control of ordering your own blood work. So if you're struggling with, your thyroid or your hormones or something like that, then Function Health can be appropriate for that. So if you want to scan that QR code and check it out, or if you have any questions about it, please leave a message in the chat. All right, this is what I went through on the Dutch side of things about the three forms of estrogen. When you're understanding estrogen, understand E1, E2, and E3 and why it matters. You can take a picture of this slide if you would like to save it. It just helps you understand. I pretty much went through this on the Dutch though. The three forms of estrogen, what each one is. E1, strongest, I'm sorry, the most dominant post-menopause, can be pro-inflammatory, potentially problematic in excess. Proper detox is important. And if you're on estradiol replacement therapy, we want to make sure that it's not becoming toxic or pro-inflammatory. So super important in understanding E1. And E2 is the strongest, most active form. It supports your brain, your bones, your skin, your libido, brain, bones, heart, muscle. Estradiol is super important. Remember, everything in your body from the top of your head to the bottom of your toes is an estrogen receptor. Finally, estriol is so gentle it's often used in bioidentical hormone replacement therapy for vaginal dryness and tissue health, even in breast cancer survivors because it's so safe and gentle. Okay, those are the three forms of estrogen. Oops, sorry, I went the wrong way. Okay, here is kind of my little favorite part to go through. So, like, knowing all those things that we just went over about your hormones, how do I balance things? How do I help myself? And we want to give you some education to take away with you today about how you can help yourself. But I have to tell you first, the truth that most women don't want to hear is that hormone replacement therapy can be extremely helpful for women over 40. But don't expect it to do work miracles if you aren't changing your diet, your lifestyle, minimizing alcohol consumption, highly processed foods, or addressing stress. No matter what your symptom or diagnosis, diet and lifestyle changes are a must. So please, please, please remember that you have to work through some of these things for yourself first to have a foundation in place before you can ever be considered a bioidentical hormone replacement therapy candidate. If you aren't doing kind of the things we're going to go over next first, you're doing yourself a disservice, and hormones can't fix it all for you. Okay. All right. And this next part, a lot of it is what Dr. Ashley went through on our call on Tuesday. If you haven't caught that call, I will also link it in the notes from today when I send out the replay for this call. But to simplify it, here's some foundations to do and the daily non-negotiables. Again, this is a great one that if you want to take a picture of the screen, please feel free. But Number one, prioritizing protein. And if you want to write this down, it can be very helpful. If you take your body weight and you multiply it by 0.7, that's how many grams of protein you should be striving for each day. I will tell you, many women will say to me, oh my gosh, that number is way too high. I could never eat that much protein. If you fall into that category, please, please, please do everything you can in your power to fight for getting 90 grams minimum of protein a day, no less. Remember, we're trying to balance our body. Our hormones need those amino acids from protein to be able to have the building blocks of protein synthesis for hormones. So you've got to work towards that. The best way to hit the is to go 30 grams of protein for breakfast, 30 grams of protein for lunch, and 30 grams of protein for dinner. I'm not going to go deep into that because Dr. Ashley did on Monday, and she did a really good job of covering all of that on Monday. So please go back and watch hers if you have any questions about that. Hydration, and I wrote here, like you mean it. So half your body weight in ounces of water, and we do encourage electrolytes. Um, I like Redmond Relay. I like LMNT. In the office, we carry LMNT and Minerals and Chill. Both can be very vital and supportive to your adrenals. Do not underestimate hydration and cellular hydration. It will help your energy. I always struggled to get electrolytes in my water in, and I finally got myself good at water, and then I added electrolytes. I'm like, oh my gosh, that changes everything with my energy. Don't underestimate what electrolytes can do for you, okay? Okay. Also, protect your sleep. Treat yourself like a toddler. If you don't have a good bedtime routine, consider implementing one, especially in the perimenopause phase, getting yourself to bed at the same time every night, making sure your circadian rhythm that Dr. Ashley talked about the other day is in a good place, and having a good wind down routine. Like, don't be out running around at 9 o'clock at night and expect yourself to be to sleep by 10. Like, you've got to have a good rhythm and routine of downshifting your nervous system and getting yourself prepared to bed. So, kind of treating yourself like a toddler. I don't know, read yourself a book like you do the toddlers, okay? Next, we want to encourage you to move your body kindly. In perimenopause specifically, a good cadence to fight for is increasing your step count intentionally. I don't think there's anything magic to 10,000. I mean, that's great if you can hit that, but if you can just even, hit somewhere between 6 and 8,000 and are moving intentionally, especially, a 10-minute walk after a meal can be life-changing for your blood sugar. Just, keeping your body moving intentionally. I love getting my walks in the morning, couple of miles, always feels great. Also, this time of life, it's imperative that you start resistance training or weightlifting. I like you to do a minimum of 3 to 4 days a week and 30-minute workouts. I don't need you going an hour, just 30 minutes resistance training, train a different part of the body, upper body, lower body. Um, and we'll be doing some more education on one of our calls specifically about that. Okay. We'll go deeper into that, but that's a good roundabout what you should be working towards. 3 days, 30 to 40 minutes of resistance training and increasing your step count that feels good for you. Number five, regulating stress every single day. So this looks like prayer, meditation, journaling, grounding, breathing, massage, red light therapy, sauna, something to help your nervous system. Even laying on your back and putting your legs up on the wall can be a nervous system reset. So you've got to be doing something to help regulate your nervous system every single day. Stress is going to happen. Life is going to life. It is your responsibility to keep your stress mitigated and manageable. Okay. I think that's one of the gifts of midlife. I like to talk about perimenopause being there's a lot of things changing and it can be overwhelming and feel so different and frustrating for women, but also there's some gifts in there if you look for them. And getting yourself into the gifts of midlife, and reframing it that way, your physiology is going to require that you pay attention to taking care of yourself and prioritizing your well-being mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. All right, and then this one gets skipped a lot, so I had to add this number six, managing your caffeine intake. I can't tell you how many women I see in my office in a month, it's a lot, who are downing significant amounts of caffeine. 1 cup is probably enough. And finally, the bottom line is no supplement or test replaces these basic things. These are your hormonal roots. Okay? And here is one of the common obstacles that we see in practice every single day. I see women going through the perimenopause transition. They go to their primary care provider or their gynecologist. They walk in and they share with their provider, I'm having heavy periods, I'm having difficulty sleeping, the whole, my stress resilience has gone down, I'm tired all the time, I'm just not handling, my husband's breathing is driving me crazy, and I don't know if I even want to do this anymore, kind of thing. And oftentimes, the best response they get is, hey, here's some birth control or a progestin on the left. Progestin is at times maybe has a place, but I find it to be quite rare, and I don't think it's the first course of action that should be considered. And unfortunately, in my opinion, it often is the first line of support for perimenopause women. I'm sorry, but if you're in perimenopause, birth control is not going to help your problems. So look at that list of progestins on the left, progesterone and progestins. I think get bulked into the same class and they're very different. Progesterone is natural. Your body makes progesterone in your reproductive years very well. We saw that on that graph. Progesterone goes up. In perimenopause, it goes down and it is the first one to typically leave. And replacing it with a progestin is not effective. And in fact, often it can cause you to gain weight. It can increase your blood clotting risk, which then increases your chance of an incidence of risk for heart attack or stroke. It can increase your risk of breast or cervical cancer. I don't know about you, but I would prefer no thank you. It can be a progestin is used to prevent pregnancy. It can cause cramping. It can exacerbate the anxiety and depression that many perimenopausal women are already struggling with. It can cause breast tenderness. It can mimic the effects of cortisol, which can make it pro-inflammatory. It can make you puffier. I, the amount of women on progestins in my office that are complaining about the weight gain despite their best efforts, they're doing all the things right and they're still gaining weight and they feel puffy. Often they're on a progestin. It can be androgenic, those male sex hormones, the DHE and testosterone can go high. It can also be estrogenic, increasing estrogen to a toxic level, and it can impair your immune function. So this is where we see oftentimes autoimmune conditions begin. Progesterone, on the other hand, and I've been known to be the person who says, you'll have to pry my progesterone out of my cold, dead hands. Now that I'm postmenopausal, my reliance on progesterone isn't as high as it once was. I do use it to help me sleep well, to balance my estradiol. However, I don't need quite as much as I used to, but during the perimenopause transition, I needed a significant amount of progesterone. And I always say, you'll have to pry my progesterone out of my cold, dead hands because it was life-changing for me. I was at a point in my life where I was an insomniac. At one point called my mom, who's a PA, and said, and she's really my hormone mentor professionally, and I said to her, Mom, I promise I am not suicidal. However, I can really understand why some people don't want to do it. I'm at that place. I do not want to do this anymore. And she looked at me and she said, Kari, you need progesterone. And I was like, huh? Really? Okay, I'll take some progesterone. I quickly started sleeping again. It just really, really helped me build some resilience back into my life. It reduced anxiety. I had never been an anxious person by nature at all, and I suddenly found myself in a place of so much anxiety. I did not have skills to even cope with it because it was so not who I feel like God made me to be. Um, so it was alarming, but also the other part of progesterone, it prevents breast tenderness. It supports your immune function. It decreases the risk of breast and other hormonally driven cancers. So we need progesterone on board to support that. In pregnancy, it can sustain pregnancy. That's why it rises on the second half of the cycle. It's anti-estrogenic, so it keeps that what we have called unopposed estrogen when estrogen is balanced with progesterone, as I showed you on the call, they like to play together, like hang out like best friends. That's what it means by anti-estrogenic. It improves your blood vessel tone and protects your cardiovascular system. It can improve your metabolic health, help make you more insulin sensitive. All very, very, very important things in the perimenopause part of life. All right, then let's talk about a progestin versus progesterone. They're similar, but they're not the same overall. Progesterone restores function and calm. Progestin can fit, but it causes issues. I like that graphic. All right. One of the things that I've talked a couple of times throughout this call is about blood sugar balance, and I don't want to skip this. If you're looking for support around blood sugar balance, the glucose goddess who is on this slide here does a really good job of illustrating this. She's a great like social media follow if you're into that kind of thing. I think she has some great website information too, but she really teaches you how to balance blood sugar. If you aren't familiar with that little device that's on the woman's arm in the photo, that's called a continuous glucose monitor or a CGM. And it's an app that connects to your phone. There's a little catheter that goes into the adipose tissue of your body, like the fat cells in your arm, and it reads your blood sugar continuously throughout the day so that when you eat, you can see this spike. Do you see these graphs over on the left, the black where it spikes up and then it comes back down? If you have bread first and then chicken salad, you're going to have a bigger spike than if you have the chicken salad and then the bread. It changes your spike. The the important part, I'm going to stop sharing this because I think this is really important. The important part of understanding why glucose spikes and mitigating glucose spikes on the balancing your blood sugar side of this conversation is um, understanding that every time your blood sugar spikes like that, your pancreas has to emit insulin. And every time insulin is emitted to pull that back to homeostasis. Now, this should happen because this is a normal part of life, but this cannot happen too much. And for a strong majority of Americans, we're spiking our blood sugars way too often. We're eating too many times throughout the day. When we sit down with the plate, we should focus on the protein first and then the other nutrient-rich foods rather than like eating a piece of sourdough toast and then the egg. You're going to have a different blood sugar spike. You're, the way you sequence your food, you need to eat the protein first to help mitigate the spike. Fiber is an important part of mitigating the spike too. But that spike and that insulin signal that your body sends from your pancreas, insulin that brings your blood sugar back to homeostasis, is a fat storing hormone. And too often we're spiking our blood sugar way too much. And so then our bodies store fat. Okay. So if you're struggling with your weight, the first thing you can do is help balance your blood sugars better. So Glucose Goddess is a great follow that does a wonderful job of showing that. All right, I'm going to go back to the slides here for you. So, yeah, or if you want to ever wear a continuous glucose monitor, there is a company called Stelo, Stelo. There's one called Thea Health, Theia Health. There's one called Levels, Levels, and I probably would tell you my favorite is NutriSense. It's NutriSense.io is the website. You can purchase continuous glucose monitors through those and monitor your blood sugar. I wear one about, I don't know, probably quarterly throughout the year if I'm just feeling like I'm a little bit off on balancing my blood sugar. And that's usually when I feel the best, I have the best energy, I sleep the best when I'm getting my blood sugars balanced. It just really helps you with accountability. I would prefer you do this on the proactive side of your health rather than doing this when you're diabetic, because eventually that's what it turns into. Okay. So if you're at a predisposition for that sort of thing, pay attention to that. Okay. All right. Let me move on to the next slide. Sorry. Okay. Um, oh yeah, I forgot to mention about continuous. Oh, those are all the ones I just mentioned listed there. Stelo, NutriSense.io, Levels, and Thea Health. They are available by prescription through a provider too. If you have health insurance, you usually have to have like an elevated fasting insulin level or A1C has to be elevated to get your insurance to cover it, but it's worth a conversation for sure. All right. And if you are looking for some protein resources, this is a protein list for you. If you would like to scan that QR code, it will take you to a Google Drive and links, hyperlinks, and some of that for some of our favorite protein sources. Um, and I'm going to share this with you. If you're in perimenopause, beginning that transition or ending that transition or wherever you might be and you're struggling to hit your protein numbers and you need to supplement it with a protein, I don't care how you get it in, just get your protein in. It will change your life as then you start to implement different ways to increase your protein level. Just please don't underestimate that, okay? All right, I'm going to go through a couple of supplement considerations just that I think that can be very, very helpful to this dynamic. These are some of our favorites for hormone support. We had these out at our hormone conference, and one of our subsequent follow-up calls is going to be from Orthomolecular, which is one of the companies that we partner with that we have a high trust value with. On the right are their products, Inosicare, creatine, reacted magnesium, rubestrin, that's for hot flashes, and Reducor. It says Inosicare, but it's actually called inositol. There's also something called Fiber MGP if you're struggling to get fiber in. They're going to come and talk about some of those in depth. But please don't ever hesitate to call our office and say, hey, I'm really struggling with hot flashes, or hey, I'm really struggling with blood sugar imbalance, or hey, I'm really struggling to put muscle on and I'm really struggling with my brain, or hey, I'm having a terrible time mitigating my um, insulin levels, or my hemoglobin A1C is elevated and I need some supplement recommendations. I think so often in our world of social media, we're relying on influencers and we're easily influenced by influencers, whether their intention is good, bad, or indifferent. They don't know your story. And we want to help you find quality sourcing that is appropriate. Don't waste your money on things without really knowing. I see it every day. People come in and like, I'm taking this, this, and this, and I don't really know what it's doing. I unfortunately see that a lot. On the left side of the screen, Mighty Maca, Balance, Jova Pro, and Velve, those top four are Dr. Anna Kabeka. I will in the future, not too far out, be doing a call with her also to go over her products and what they can do. But Mighty Maca helps with estrogen detoxification. So remember how I talked about estrogen becoming toxic and those 2, 4, 16 pathways and sending it down the right pathways? If you're having gastrointestinal issues and you're not well balanced at all, Mighty Maca is probably my favorite go-to. It's a green drink. It is life-changing. It is super helpful. Balance is progesterone cream. Julva, if you're struggling, Julva is for your vulva. Even our boys at home know that. We've taught them all, like, hey, that's a normal part of life. We take a little bit of pride in our boys knowing about how important Julva is for um, tissue support of the vulva in the perimenopause transition. It is a high level of DHEA that you apply it clitoris to anus every day. It's a wonderful product and very helpful. Velve on there is Velve is for play. It is a lubricant that is very helpful for intimacy intercourse. And please, if you're struggling with vaginal dryness or pain with intercourse, those are your products. Silky Peach Cream is an estriol cream if you're struggling with terrible low estrogen levels and you are looking for a safe option to use topically if your vaginal or vulva tissues are starting to change and they can kind of shrivel up and get dry and very uncomfortable, or you start having UTIs or frequent yeast infections, please consider Julva Pro and or Silky Peach Cream or even some vaginal estradiol. Um, all three of those can be incredibly supportive. We want you to know that there are support options and don't be embarrassed to even send, if you're not comfortable calling and asking questions about those things. One, I'm so comfortable talking about it. I love to talk about it. I could talk about it for days because I want to help normalize that. It is nothing to be ashamed of, and we want you to have confidence in asking for how to help yourself feel best. And then finally, the bottom one, Minerals and Chill, is the electrolyte that has the adrenal support in it that can be very, very, very helpful to this. I'm not going to go through those because Dr. Anna is going to come back and do this. One final thing that I want to go over. I mentioned a couple of times about seeing clients go to their primary care or their gynecologist and sort of being gaslit. And I want to address this. And it's not just you and it's not just them. Why providers struggle and why it's time for a new approach. I don't want to villainize providers. Providers are bound by insurance restrictions, time restrictions, huge patient loads, very dynamic situations, and limited amount of time and resources and energy and all the things. So I am not vilifying what they're trying to do, but we do need to expand the support system for women. And I believe that what we do here in our practice does that for women. So if you have never considered working with a health coach like myself, I am board certified. So when you go on to like Instagram or whatever and you see different coaches, please be mindful about how and who you're choosing. If you see that NBC-HWC, you can see it on my name on the screen. That is the national board certification. It is a national board allotment and a test that you have to take to become set apart. It is the top regulatory governing body to be sure that those metrics are met. And if you're going to have someone support you through really complicated transitions like this, please be mindful about how you choose that. Look for that NBC-HWC thing there. I think that's personally very, very, very important. I took that added step because I wanted our clients to have that security. Um, as a coach, I'm not here to diagnose or treat you. I'm here to walk with you as your teammate. And as a national board certified functional medicine and health coach, I help women to kind of go through getting unstuck, where you can help you, I should say, identify what's been holding you back and finally move forward in confidence. And we give you the time and the space to really sit down and sort of work through where you're stuck and help you identify that when we're in, Tony Robbins always says, when you're in your head, you're dead. I love that saying. But when you're stuck with all of the cryptic parts about all of this information in this transitional part of life, these are really important decisions. And I encourage you not to have to make those by yourself. Having someone help you navigate that can be very therapeutic, very affirming, and very empowering. We also help you make sense of the confusion. We break down the hormone chaos into like manageable, um, and clear, actionable steps so that you can take action into the next thing. Um, we also help you find what works for you. And remember, I talked about hormones being like a fingerprint. There's no one size fits all advice. We create a personalized approach that helps fit your life. We also make sure, and it's very important to us in the dynamic that we create here, that you feel seen, you feel heard, and you feel supported because healing does not happen in isolation, and you shouldn't have to figure it out all alone. Okay? All right. I think with that, what else does anyone have any questions that you would like to ask? Please feel free to drop anything in the um, comments here or in the chat. Our office phone is here at 517-263-3525. You can always call and talk to our office staff. If you're not sure, best steps, best next steps, um, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask any of those questions anytime at all. Okay? And this is a picture of our office. We are in Adrian. Our address is 824 West Maumee. That's where I'm doing this call live from today. All righty. Thank you guys so much for being here today. Oh, I just saw a chat come through. Let me go. Thank you, Paige. Appreciate you. Um, and again, we are an open book with any questions, comments, or conversations we can do to be helpful. I will keep you in the loop with our next calls. We are scheduling a couple more, working on those dates. And I do know you can mark your calendars for March 27th. I am going to be bringing on my high performance coach, Christine. She spoke at the conference. Seems kind of weird to have a high performance coach speaking at a hormone conference. But here's the thing that I think gets skipped a lot in the hormone conversation. Our nervous systems play such a big role in our hormone health, the way that our bodies handle stress, the way that our nervous system, that background operating system that we don't always have control over without a lot of intention, can kind of hijack our systems, and we can get stuck in some really difficult patterns that interrupt our life, the relationships in our life, the way we show up in our jobs, the way we show up in our marriages and with our kids, our families, all those kinds of things. Christine really brings such a interesting and dynamic approach to helping you help yourself. So please, please, please mark your calendar for March 27th. I'm going to check this real quick. I'm actually going to take the time to double check the time for you guys because I don't want you to miss that one. That's probably going to be one of the most impactful calls for you guys. So it's at 2 p.m. Um, on March 27th. So put that in your book. I don't want you guys to miss that one. We're also going to have Pelvic Care coming on and talking to us. Jessica Chesser and Lee Hancock are going to be doing a call on pelvic floor health. They also have an app. If you are looking to download a pelvic floor app, check out Pelvicare. It's available on the Apple Store and any app store now. They launched that at the conference. Their presentation can help everyone. I will keep you posted when that one is scheduled. Um, and I'll follow up with all of the others. I will be certain that that gets posted and communicated with you guys. So thank you again for being here. I hope you guys have a wonderful Thursday. All right, see ya.